Awesome. We are live. Welcome in, everyone. We'll get started in a minute or so here and wait for some more folks to hop in. But while we're waiting, I created this poll just to see how people are feeling. So, what's your ideal holiday destination? Beach and sunshine, mountains and nature, a new city to explore, or staying at home? I'm curious to see what people say because we're almost around the holiday time. Let's see. Hopefully everyone can see the poll.
I hope it's a multi-select one.
Yeah, click them all. Which one? Here, I'll pull this up on the screen, Olga, so you can see which one's your go-to?
Mountains. If I have to pick one, it would be mountains. But I wish I had multiple selection. Select them all.
Wow, it looks like mountains are winning. Love it.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, so welcome in, everybody. We'll get started in another minute or so. My name is Sydney. I'm our Senior Product Marketing Manager here on the Rally team. And today I'm super excited to chat with Olga, who is the Head of UX Research at Alteryx. And prior to that, she was a UX research lead at Garmin and has over 2 decades of experience in the UX research industry. So we are, in really great company today. As we go through our chat, please feel free to leave questions and also share where you're listening in from. We love to see where people are calling in from. And then, we'll get started in a few minutes. But Olga, before we get into the questions, I'd love to, just sort of hear a little bit more about your background.
Yeah, sure. So I've been doing this for longer than I like to admit, like Sydney mentioned. And I do feel pretty lucky because I had the luxury of going through the various disciplines of UX before I landed in research. I have a background in software engineering, so I actually started as a UX developer, dabbled at that for a little bit, then did some UX research, and finally landed where I loved and stayed for my entire career, UX research. So that's been a wild journey. I've done B2C, B2B, startups and small companies, consultancies, and it's been a good ride.
Amazing. Yeah, that's super interesting that I didn't actually know that you had a software engineering background. That's amazing. Yeah, I'm sure that gives you like a lot of sort of leverage or at least knowledge when you're like working closely with product teams. So that's really cool.
Yeah, it definitely is a great advantage. I'm gonna again age myself, but I come from a generation where computer science and cognitive psychology was the closest fit for what we call today user experience. So that was the path I took.
Got it. Very interesting. Awesome. Cool. Well, welcome in everyone. Looks like we have a few more folks have funneled in, so we'll get started with our questions. As we go through, please leave your questions for Olga in the chat. Usually how we do these AMA webinars is the first sort of half of our conversation, we'll go through some questions that have been submitted in advance, and then we'll get to live questions towards the end of our chat. So super excited to have you all here with us. I want to start with sort of your personal journey, Olga, and sort of like your early lessons in leadership. So you kind of explained a little bit about your path into UX leadership, but I'm curious, with your background in software engineering and sort of that cognitive psychology overlap, what has surprised you most throughout your career and transition into UX research?
Yeah. I moved from really being a hands-on UX researcher, and I did this for quite a while before I became a leader of research, to transition to lead researchers, and it came with multiple surprises. I think one of the first things that I learned is what earned me the role. My research acumen, my fluency in methodologies, moderation skills was not going to be the thing that's going to keep me in leadership. Leadership required really different skill set and different muscles. It was clarity, it was ability to influence, emotional resistance, change management, and I really needed to hone those things fast. Um, Also, before I was promoted to a leader, I really thought of that as being a reward for being a strong IC. That was not the case. Leadership is not a reward, it's an opportunity earned. And before I earned the title, I had to show that I was ready to operate and have been operating like a leader.
Interesting. And I know we're going to get into that a little bit more. But yeah, it's interesting to hear you say that you initially thought of that promotion to leadership as a reward, but now you sort of see it as an opportunity that you were granted and that you sort of had to show you were capable of leading people before you even got the title. So yeah, I know we have questions and we'll dig into that a little bit more. Um, so I'm curious. When we chatted earlier, you said that the title, having a leadership title, doesn't get you in the room or even keep you there. So how have you continued to earn your seat at the table throughout your career?
Yeah. Um, it's a ongoing effort. So I think in most organizations, at least the ones that I worked with, promotions lag impact. You have to show that you are doing the job at the next level before you actually get promoted into it. And it does sound puzzling when we talk about leadership because I think it's a very natural assumption to think that you will be leading people. You will be leading people that report to you directly. But that's not at all the only type of leadership that you can do. And that's really a key difference. You kind of have to recognize that leadership is many things, and you will not be an effective leader if you can only lead the people who report to you. So that was the big shift, that leadership is about influence, and what gets you in the room is not the title, it's your ability to influence people. And you're invited not because of what's on your LinkedIn, but you're invited because people trust your thinking and your ability to move work.
Yeah, that's super interesting. It's almost like, yeah, exactly what you said. You have to prove that you're capable of that. And I almost think that once you get to that level of leadership, whether you have the title or not, if people trust you, people go to you first for advice. It's kind of, it feels natural, that evolution into more of a leadership title. But I'm curious, it's also, I would say, maybe hard to hear that because someone might think, why would I do the job without getting compensated for it? Like why would I put in that extra effort to lead people when I'm not, getting paid that same amount? So I'm curious what your advice would be on that.
I can tell you what I do. I do it for myself. I Leadership is not easy. It comes with a lot of strings. So if you don't love it, don't do it. There are definitely way easier ways to earn a buck. Um, but it's something that you have to find your way and your authentic voice that connects you to the people you lead, and then it's really rewarding and enjoyable. So that's my motivation.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that you're saying you really have to do it for yourself, and if you don't love it, don't do it. And I think that is sort of applicable to any role, in any
Exactly.
org. Yeah, and I think if you do love it, then it comes more naturally to you, and you're excited about projects and yeah, about sort of like where the business is heading, where your team is heading, and everyone's individual growth, and yeah, it just comes a little bit more naturally.
And I think, especially nowadays, many companies are much more mature in their approach, which is something that I really appreciate. And they develop career ladders for individual contributors as well as people leaders. So you don't have to be people leader to get promoted. And some of those considerations of days past don't apply anymore. So you really need to pursue it if that's something you feel passionate about.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely appreciate that yeah, individual contributor IC career path, because some people don't, yeah, I feel like when I sort of started my career as well, it was like the expectation is you eventually want to get to that leadership position, but that's not necessarily what everybody wants. So yeah, it's really, really nice to see that. I put a poll into the yeah, to see what folks are saying about where they are in their UX career today. So it looks like most folks are mid career, growing into leadership. A few people I see forever. We love it.
I love it too. It's good to know what you want and what you excel at, right? And I've actually went back and forth through my career from IC to leader and back.
Wow,
And back
interesting.
again.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Yeah, love it. I'm definitely curious about what that what that path looked like for you. But I know another thing that we talked about when we chatted earlier is that you mentioned that one-on-ones are where the real magic happens with leadership. And so I'm curious if you can tell us, why does that matter more maybe than sort of like those big all hands moments?
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm a quiet leader. So for me, building trust is really the crux of leadership and the crux of influence. And for me, building trust is easiest in those quiet moments where true connection can happen. And I'm not saying that all hands or fancy decks don't matter. They do matter. But the true work doesn't have to be loud. It happens through listening, through reframing, nudging, and coaching. And one on ones is where most people feel much more comfortable to open up, to become vulnerable, and share real concerns. So I'd say take the time to listen to what people care deeply about, ask what truly motivates them. That's how you create allies. That's how you create people that you can trust. And that allows you to influence and guide teams over time. It's also where you can coach, and if needed, to correct behaviors. You do that in one on one, you do that with care in an intimate setting. And at the end of the day, people remember how you made them feel in moments of vulnerability much more than what you said in a big presentation.
Yeah, that's so true. I heard a quote once that was like, it's not necessarily what you do, but how you do it. And so I think exactly what you're explaining of creating those moments of trust and connection where you can start to build those relationships with team members. Yeah, that's amazing. I really love also what you said, that true work doesn't have to be loud. That is really motivating to hear as an introvert myself, that yeah, you don't need those like big flashy moments in order to build a solid relationship with your team. I'm
Exactly.
curious, Olga, if you have any advice for people who are maybe like on the other side, like having one-on-ones with their leader or their manager, if there's anything you would recommend maybe bringing to those meetings, or any sort of like conversation starters, so that yeah, your sort of manager can see, oh, maybe maybe Sydney is interested in moving into more of a leadership position.
Yeah. So I think sort of twofold. One part of it is how you want to position yourself to be considered as a leader, and there are some tips there. And the other one is how to manage your manager, because that's the other part to it. So to position yourself to be a leader, I would say start by building almost a leadership portfolio for yourself. And this is not something that you have to share, but it's noting some things that you are doing, people you're influencing, the system that you build, decisions, and observing and noting what worked well and what doesn't work well, and developing your style and kind of watching your own evolution to build that track record for yourself. um, the other piece is observe the people around you who lead around you, and watch how they lead, how they make decisions, and note what they do that you want to adapt and mimic, and note what they do that you absolutely don't want to adopt. Because I think all of us had a leader or a manager through their career that they kind of watched and said, that I will never want to do that. Um, so that's kind of a little bit of the how do you build yourself to be a leader before you have the track record. And in the one-on-ones, uh, I'm a researcher, so I do everything through deep listening. I'd say try to listen to your manager and understand their needs, what problems they're trying to solve, and then plug into that and position yourself so you're invaluable and your contribution can shine and help them. And that connection is going to create the opportunity.
Yeah, that's amazing. I really like the idea of creating a leadership portfolio. And I know that you said you don't necessarily have to share this, but I think it is really nice to remind yourself of those projects. Maybe in a moment when you are, figuring out what is your next step in your career going to be, you can always lean back on that and see, okay, what did I do? And, maybe you're lucky enough to be able to have your hand in some like cross-functional projects. I think research is very cross-functional. So then it's like you can kind of take your career wherever you want if you have that experience to be able to back it up and tell those stories. So I think that's great
Exactly.
advice.
Yeah, and I think if you think about leadership as something that you build up through time with care and invest in, it becomes much more easy to understand and to build than this thing that you have or don't have. It's not the consequence. You keep working at it.
Yeah, yeah, that's awesome. All right. So, yeah, in the next sort of section of our conversation, I want to talk about some of the tensions and trade-offs that come with managing teams and leading across functions. And so, one thing that you also mentioned to me when we chatted before is that there is no such thing as stability. And so, I'm curious, what have you learned about leading through constant change, especially in sort of the work environment that we're in right now?
Yeah, that's definitely been a lot of change with definitely in high tech and the economy, and I think a lot of us are impacted. AI is another force that's blowing through the industry. Um, Change, you have to embrace it. There's nothing else you can do. It's really the norm nowadays. So I would just say stop waiting for stability. Leading through change and ambiguity, you just have to acknowledge the situation, stay present, stay transparent and clear, even when the answers are not readily available. I'd say, especially when they're not readily available. It's okay to say, I don't know, even if you have the biggest title in the room. Your team will appreciate it. Leadership is not about creating calm waters. It's about helping people navigate through those without losing direction. And your people will watch you through the change. And that's where you have an opportunity. You actually have an obligation to set the emotional tone. You may not always be able to provide clarity, but you can always provide care through those transitions.
Yeah, and I think that's so important for. I think that is really what makes strong leaders really strong is they're able to show that vulnerability and be
Yeah,
transparent when they don't have an answer to something, or
exactly.
at the very least say, I don't know the answer to that, but I'm going to help you find out.
Exactly.
And yeah, exactly what you said about yeah, helping people navigate that change without losing direction and keeping people on track. And again, being the person that they can come to and can trust in those moments to know that you're going to be able to support them. I think that, yeah, that's really important.
Exactly. I think it's a myth to think that leaders have all the answers. Um, I think many young leaders start leading by being that expert, but once you mature, especially if you are tasked with leading people who work in areas you don't fully understand, you have to shed that and you have to lead in other ways.
Yeah, totally. I think it also like that vulnerability makes people more trustworthy, because like no one knows everything. If someone does have an answer for everything, that's a little concerning. Awesome. I've also heard you say you've described management as a squeeze, or like being the middle child, just because there's sort of pressure from leadership, from your team. So I'm curious, how do you start to navigate that?
Definitely. That is specifically how I feel about middle management, where I sit. It's really hard work being kind of stuck between the executive management, the C level, and your team, where you have to translate between vision and execution and connect those layers. And you're trying to really protect your team without hiding the reality, bring in communication, and kind of helping your management and upper management to understand the demands of the job and building transparency both ways. I'd say, especially in times of change, like we talked about change, turmoil, that's where middle managers get really squeezed. They're accountable for delivering company strategy, goals, KPIs, managing executive expectations. But we also must support our individual contributors who may be struggling with that change management. So that's a constant balancing act you can't fake, and it's just work. Despite the conflicting demands, you have to kind of work through building that transparency and communicate both ways to set the expectations.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm wondering, how do you even start to get experience with that? Maybe for folks listening that aren't in a management position and want to be. I'm curious, how do you continue to build that skill?
Of negotiating up and down.
Yeah, yeah, like maintaining that balance.
Yeah, I think it's like, especially people from UX, we're very used to that negotiation with stakeholders. So I would learn from that world. We often talk with technologists, software engineers, coders, and business stakeholders, and we're kind of in the middle. So it's that same type of the same soft skills of bringing people together, understanding the point of view of each person, what they're trying to achieve, and then negotiating in between. So that's my
Yeah.
best guess. I don't have all the answers.
Yeah, it kind of sounds like that you, or I guess it's kind of sounding like you have to learn as you go a little bit, and just kind of, yeah, figure out what your team needs and what, executive expectations are. And like you were saying at the earlier in our conversation, maintaining that transparency and staying vulnerable with your team throughout it.
Absolutely. Leading is not arriving, it's an evolution, it's work. And your team, your stakeholders, your organization, they're constantly changing. And you have to intentionally design your solutions one moment at a time. And you will make mistakes. That's guaranteed. Like everything else in life, I think just the best advice that I'm not always great at following is don't over index on your mistakes. Reflect, learn, keep moving, just like any other job.
Yeah, yeah. I think yeah, that's great advice. And I really like that you even said reflect. Like I feel like we shouldn't gloss over that one. I think even I've noticed some of the stronger leaders take that intentional time to even ask their team members, "Hey, what could I be doing better?" And continue have that continuous feedback loop.
Absolutely.
Perfect. Awesome. All right. So the other thing that I think, yeah, a lot of maybe even people listening in today might be struggling with is leading disciplines that you maybe don't have as much experience in, or that you're not an expert in, like research ops. I don't think, well, I don't know. I could definitely be wrong on this, but I don't think people go to school. I think it's rare to go to school specifically for research ops. I think folks in research operations have wildly different backgrounds that sort of bring a unique skill set to the industry. So I'm curious, how do you lead in disciplines like research ops that you maybe aren't an expert in, and how do you build trust with those teams?
Yeah, um, that's a great question. I want to take a second of a detour and express my deepest gratitude to all the research ops people. As a researcher, I'm endlessly grateful. I admire them. It's a job I could never do. And I think they're often undervalued in many organizations. Um, Back to the question. Luckily for me, I was able to cut my teeth on people leadership first by leading UX researchers, and that was something I knew quite in depth by the time I became a leader. So that was much easier. It was only later in my journey that I had to lead people whose work wasn't in my wheelhouse, like res ops. And that certainly was a stretch. It just requires this next level of maturity. I still had an understanding, right? I'm not talking about leading somebody who's you have no clue what they're doing. That's not it. But I just didn't have the depth that people on my team had. And for me, the key was to really acknowledge that I'm not their problem solver. I'm not their subject matter expert, and that's okay. Hopefully, you've been strategic enough to hire a team that complements you and not a team that clones you. A team that's really greater than the sum of its parts. And once you hire for that, your job becomes to enable those people that you brought in, not to micromanage them. And your job is really to create an environment and put the mechanisms in place to make them successful. So you don't have to be an expert. You have to be an enabler.
I think that's really great advice. I think it's interesting the shift between, if you're coming from an IC role into a leadership role, I think I think the people management side of leadership is totally different from what you might be doing as an IC.
Oh, yeah.
Like I feel like people management is like its own like job,
Yeah.
and then you get placed into that specific industry, and I feel like you can sort of quickly understand the context, but I think the real skill is that people management. And I've also know it's like definitely not for everyone.
It's not. And I'm very grateful that a lot of companies now recognize that you need to invest and train people leaders, that not everybody can just magically become one. Because in the past, you would get promoted based upon your hard skills. If you were a great software engineer, you would become a team lead for software engineers. Well, it certainly helps being a new leader to know the subject matter in and out. I wouldn't do it any other way, but that's only half the job.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, I think it's definitely maybe motivating for people too who don't have as much experience to know that you can definitely continue to work on those people management skills. And if leadership is something that you want to get into, that it's absolutely possible without needing, to be an expert in that in the industry.
Of course.
The other piece that you've mentioned that I think I really took away from our earlier conversation was hiring for what you're not. So, can you share how you've built teams that can complement or, yeah, rather than mirror your strengths, and why that's important?
Yeah. Um, well, you have to sort of avoid the ego trap. And I think it's very natural. Early leaders, I did this myself, we tend to hire people in our own image. And that's not maliciously, it's very natural because you know what made you successful and you look for that. It's also easier to connect to people with same backgrounds, mindsets, the people that communicate in the same style. Um, but you have to let that go. You have to make that intentional shift and find people whose skills complement yours. Don't clone yourself because you're not building a fan club. You're building a team. And that means that just like a sports team, you need different skills. So you need to be looking for people who push your thinking, to people who fill your blind spots, people who work differently from you. I would go as far as to say, hire people that makes you even a little bit uncomfortable. They will push you to grow.
I love that advice. I think what you said about filling your blind spots, that's amazing. And I think that also kind of leans into the importance of building a diverse team, whether that's, people from even like, yeah, different backgrounds, different locations within the world. If you are working for a remote company, different experiences, I think absolutely like having those different perspectives on a team can make decision making or even projects so much more well-rounded and well thought out.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's super, super interesting. So for the next section in our conversation, I want to kind of talk about leading from that introverted perspective. And I know earlier in our chat, you said that you're a quiet leader, and I've never heard that before. I really love that. So how have you embraced that as a strength rather than a limitation?
Yeah, that's the lesson that took me the longest to learn. Really, some days I'm still learning it. It tapped into my deepest insecurities. For the longest time, I thought that to lead, you had to, look the part. You have to be confident, composed, articulate, extroverted. Those are all the stereotypes we often see, and I had a really hard time reconciling that image of a leader with who I feel I am. I'm an introvert, I'm a processor, I'm not the life of a party, I'm not quick on my feet. I'm the person you reach out to when you want a thoughtful, careful perspective. So I had a ton of self doubt until I truly realized that you don't have to be the loudest or most charismatic person in the room to be a strong leader. And what it took for me, like that moment, was that my manager and mentor, she said, Olga, you're a researcher, lead like one. And I realized that my superpower is the same one that made me a strong researcher. It's deep listening, it's empathy, it's thoughtful, systematic problem solving, and that's the place I lead from. And I've watched others on my UX team, designers, they leverage their design superpowers. They're very different, and you just have to find your own.
Yeah. Yeah, that's super interesting. I think definitely a power of folks in the research industry is, at least everyone that I've chatted with, whether they're introverted or extroverted, everyone's very thoughtful and intentional, and has like a really strong critical thinking skill. And I think that's what you need to be successful in the research industry. So it's really nice to hear that you can still be a leader even if you are introverted or sort of that quieter voice in the room. And I think it goes back to that, like, building a team, building a diverse team, because I would imagine on, the leadership or like middle management team, you want, different managers that have
Mhm.
those, yeah, different characteristics or personalities. But I'm curious, in those rooms where there are louder voices, maybe more extroverted leaders, how do you make sure that your voice is still heard?
That's a challenge. It's I don't win every day, but I have to find ways that I can influence, and that's where the one-on-ones come in. Maybe follow-ups and Slack conversations in teams, maybe smaller meetings. And often I do have to do big presentations and put myself out there, and it's not very comfortable, but it's part of the work. So just have to put in.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really interesting. And I think kind of what you were saying before about those one-on-ones, I was sort of thinking about it more from, one-on-ones with your team. But if you have one-on-ones with other managers or even, more executive leadership and you can continue to build that trust, then it's like you could have allies that are like, "Hey Olga, what did you think about that?" And, like have those louder voices,
Exactly.
as
Yeah.
people you can lean on.
There's always an opportunity if there is a big company meeting and the executives leaders do a presentation and you have an idea and you're not comfortable saying it in front of 4,000 people, you can reach out with a follow-up. You can email them. You can say, can I have 5 minutes of your time? I want to chat about something that intrigued me. And you'll be surprised how much people value. They value engagement. They value people who listen closely and connect to the strategy. So you just need to find ways that are authentic for you, because you can't fake it. It's not going to work.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. And I think then your work, if you are, bringing your authentic self to work every day, you're going to enjoy it a lot more. If you sort of put on a persona and come to work and try to fake it, it's going to be so draining, especially as an introvert, you
It would
know.
be exhausted. It would be exhausted. And people feel, your team will know if you're constantly faking it. That
Right.
don't do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Interesting. I put another poll, and so this one is, what leadership challenge resonates with you most right now? So it looks like the number one answer is leading through constant change. And I'm curious, Olga, if these responses surprise you at all.
Um, it resonates with me quite a bit. I think, like we were talking today, there's just so much change around us. Our industry went from super desirable into constant layoffs. AI is threatening a lot of the jobs. We have to adapt and evolve on so many levels. So it doesn't surprise me. I think everybody is going through change. It's just more of a nuance of which change is the most prominent for you today.
Yeah. That's super interesting. And I think the other thing too is that we're not alone too with this change. I think the entire industry is affected by this. And so even I think one thing that I've, personally done in my career is like reached out to other folks that are maybe navigating something similar. And I know that there's so many different research and research ops communities out there to
Yeah,
join to sort of get other ideas and feedback and yeah, I guess align with people that are going through something very similar.
I love it. I do it all the time on LinkedIn, networking, and just asking for thought partnership, where people who you may not know, but they may be in a very similar function to yours, or a company that interests you. So that's a great way to kind of get together and chat and exchange experiences and see what problems they're solving, how you can learn from them.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that you call that thought partnership. That's awesome. I love it.
That's what it is to me.
That's great. Um, so another thing that you mentioned is that it's important to watch others soar when you are in a leadership role. So, are you able to share a story or a moment with us that made this lesson real for you?
Yes. I hired a person on my team for a specific skill set, and they were really great at it. Over time, like it happens often, the role evolved, and I really needed to expand into an area that they didn't have experience in at all. And I still remember that deer in the headlights look when I asked them to do this additional responsibility. And the initial response, we were in person, it was before COVID. They said, I can't do it. I've never done it before. I don't know where to start. You have to find somebody, you have to hire somebody else to do that part of the job. You have to find somebody more experienced. But I've seen them work, and I knew their approach to problems, their mindset, the work ethic. And I said, I believe you can do this. I'm going to support you. And I want you to give it a go because I know you can. Just give it a good try. It took us a whole day in the conference room. We were locked together in this conference room, whiteboarding and thinking through this. And it was really interesting. And I kind of watched and helped this person shift from panic into seeing the possibility, not actually doing anything, but just kind of shift the mindset. Um, Fast forward a year, they nailed it, just completely exceeded all expectations, and then started mentoring others and sharing how we built the system. Turned out better than they thought, better than I hoped for. And that was the moment I can't forget. I'm just deeply grateful to be able to witness that transformation. That's the kind of thing that makes leadership worth it.
Yeah, that's amazing. An amazing story. I think it's a really good example of um, where you weren't necessarily solving their problems, but or like doing the work for them, but helping them to navigate that situation, and yeah, being able to help them shift that panic and being that supportive leader that they can trust and maybe bounce ideas off of, or yeah,
Exactly.
share thoughts. Yeah, I think that's a really
Yeah.
great story.
Neither one of us knew the solution. I had no clue. I just had faith. And sometimes you just need that a leap of faith and knowing that your person is really strong.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I also think it's really great to hear you say that too, because obviously you had such a great amount of trust in that person as well, that they were like the right person to be able to navigate that. And so I think that also, yeah, obviously, makes you a really strong leader is when you can look at your team and be like, yeah, I have a really great team, and that you're that supporting piece. But yeah, just being able to have that trust. It's
Yes.
great.
And that wasn't day one. They've certainly proved they had a track record of success in their area. And I also don't want you to think that I just throw them into a deep end like that. There was a lot of scaffolding and hard work along the way, lots of mistakes. Um, but it was just a wonderful, wonderful growth to see.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, that's awesome. Amazing. Well, I know we do have some questions in the chat, so I want to make sure that we get to these.
Let's do
So
it.
let's see, where shall we start? Okay, I really like this question. Maybe we can actually, I'm going to pull up another challenge that looks like Mike was having with leadership, sort of relating to that poll. And I'm curious to get your perspective on this, Olga. So, my biggest challenge is finding ways to influence things like how we communicate with and get feedback from our client when there's another person at another company who's our team lead and mostly owns those relationships. So, it seems like relationship building, yeah, finding ways to influence people. I'm curious if you have any thoughts on this challenge.
And I'm curious, is the nuance here is that you need to influence through somebody else, that you're not invited in the room? Or maybe I'm misreading this.
I will see if Mike can put any additional context in the chat, but that's what it's seeming like, that there's another person at another company who is the team lead.
Yeah. Wow, that's a tough one. I don't know that I've had to kind of, well, I guess I wonder if that's similar to coaching people who need to solve their own problems. So you kind of take your coach less than a leader hat, and try to deeply understand the person who's in front of the problem and what are some of the barriers and what have they tried and what have they not tried yet. And instead of you solutioning, kind of coach them to come to their own solution, because if I interpret the question correctly, you're not in the situation. I don't know if I answered the question or talked around it.
Yeah, no, I think that's really interesting. I think it's definitely hard I think a lot of us in in UX research are perfectionists, and at least like for example, find it really hard to um, sit back and not jump to solutions immediately. So it's really, yeah, it is a challenge for sure to sort of let other people come to their own conclusion, but being that like supportive person along the way, I think that's definitely a challenge.
You can solution for your team. That's not encouraging growth. That's so hard at the beginning, and I know sometimes you just have to kind of hold tight and say, don't say that, but let them explain. It's a muscle you have to develop. When I think we didn't actually talk about people management. We talked about leadership, but if you're actually managing people, you're not, leader is one of the hats, but you need to manage performance. You need to manage work, and you have to be a coach. And I think this nuance here is about coaching, which is a little bit of a different situation.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, hopefully that was helpful, Mike. If you have any other follow-up questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat or reach out to us afterwards. The next question for you, I'm going to pull it up. It's a bit of a longer one, and so it may get cut off, but I'll do my best to sort of summarize. So it seems like this person is a senior UXR and they like to do multiple things in parallel, and sometimes they get stuck. Some of those projects get stuck in pending for a short or long time. It seems like they maybe have a lot going on.
Mhm.
Um, could this be a weakness for someone who would like to grow as a leader?
The fact that projects get stuck on hold.
Yeah, or I think just the urge to have multiple projects going on at the same time. And I definitely relate to this because I love to have different things, many different balls in the air, and sometimes it's hard to prioritize on which one is the most important.
Got you. Um, Yeah, so I think we can talk a little bit about the prioritization challenge, but the extended challenge, I have that often on my team a lot, and kind of things that get stuck and waiting. And I think the key there is to continuously build transparency with your stakeholders, with your manager, so they don't think you're not doing anything, and with your line of management that may not be your direct manager. Um, and sometimes, especially in research, we have often circumstances outside of our control. Recruiting gets stuck, the holidays, research is dead. So things often don't move as quick as we wanted to move. And when you share updates constantly with caveats and you explain the status and where things are, I think that muscle is really going to work to your advantage. That's going to show you're proactive, you're on top of things, you're not going dark, you're collaborative, all those things that you want to be recognized for.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I think that's super interesting that you're sort of recommending to yeah, keep stakeholders in the loop and have that continuous communication and share updates on each of those projects. I think that's really helpful because then it's like you don't have people being like, "Where's this?" or "What happened to this?" or "What's going on?" It's like, "Oh yeah, Sydney sent an update." And so, I also know that some managers don't necessarily read updates a lot of the time, but you can kind of say, "Oh yeah, here's the update that I shared with the team, and this is where the state of
yeah,
this project." Yeah,
I do have a little tip. It doesn't always work, but about updates, it works for me. When I start working with a new manager, I always make a point of asking them where and how they like to be communicated, because sometimes it's a channel. So some people don't read emails, but they will be responsive to Slack. Some people want a meeting. Some people are readers. Others, you need to give them a talk through. So if you adjust your updates and your style to what your manager would be most receptive for, that's going to help you a lot.
Interesting. Yeah. The other piece of this question that I also wanted to chat through is what I hear from my manager is you have to focus on one thing and get deeper at that. So I'm curious if someone's getting that feedback from a manager, what would be your thoughts on that?
Um, I think that I would approach it as an opportunity to align on expectations and ask questions for to give you examples, and I think that that's a very reasonable and helpful tool when you have sort of high level feedback. It's hard to break, right? If somebody's telling you, well, you're not focused, or you're slow, or you're not proactive, that can mean so many things, and it's very discouraging because you don't always know where to start. So I think you should try to find a polite way to ask, can you give me some examples so I understand what situations you see where I can improve, and how, and what would be a behavior or an outcome that you're looking for. So in this example, it sounds like they're doing too many things. Well, the manager thinks only you should focus on one thing. That's an opportunity to ask, what is the one thing that's most important for the manager to move the work? Because, yes, if they're focused on the wrong thing, that's not a recipe for success, for sure. And the depth is an opportunity to align on deliverables. I've seen teams that thrive on very quick and shallow updates. Talking about research, it may be that a researcher conducted a whole study and all they're looking for is a few bullet points, and that's enough to go. And I've seen teams that require long, detailed, almost academic reports, and then a meeting and a walkthrough. And you have to know your team and your culture to be successful, to kind of tie into the outcome they're looking for. So don't be shy asking for examples.
Yeah, I really like that advice. Yeah, that's really great. I think the other thing that you mentioned that I really love was to approach this as an opportunity. I think that sort of takes like the stress off. It's like, oh, I can, maybe ask some questions, clarify things, and learn from this. And, if you're trying to move into that more leadership role, it's like, how do I take like a leader perspective to the situation, and what can I learn from it? I think that's a really great way to frame it.
Exactly. And I know critical feedback is sometimes really can be difficult to digest. So, one thing that I do sometimes is to kind of sit with it, give myself a moment to cool down and disconnect from the initial knee jerk response. And that allows me to think, okay, what was actually said, what was actually written, let me break this down to understand what they're saying, what they're trying to achieve. And that moment in time can make things feel less personal, less negative, less threatening, and allow you to turn this into a growth moment.
Yeah, absolutely. Love it. I know we're approaching the end of this AMA, which it's just flown by. So I hope we can get to a few more questions here. This one is from Maggie, who says, how do you advocate for yourself when you feel that leadership doesn't always value what you observe?
Doesn't value what you observe, or doesn't value what you bring to the table? I'm kind of curious. um,
Yeah, let's see, Maggie, if you are able to add additional context in the chat. But yeah, I'm curious. Okay, the value of what Maggie brings.
of what you bring. Yeah, I think you kind of have to dig deep. When people start a new job or a new role, that's naturally the easiest to align on expectations, and that's back to the every company, every team works different ways. You have to connect to what this particular team, this particular company, this particular manager values, and you can deploy different tactics to get to that. You can have a conversation like we just talked about expectations and value. You can observe them. I think that's one of the best ways that I deploy, because people, cognitive psychology, we don't always recognize how we operate. We say things, we behave different ways. But when you watch your manager, you kind of see how they operate. And very often people appreciate very similar things. So that would be my advice, to try to align to what your leader is valuing and looking for. And to be real, sometimes it's not a fit. Sometimes if the company requires you to be completely outside of your comfort zone or your values or something that you want for yourself, that's when you have to do the hard thinking and ask yourself, is this the place where I will grow?
Yeah, yeah. I think that can also be like a hard truth to hear. Yeah, the other thing that's like that I'm hearing is it's sounding like I think the ability to communicate in the voice that your stakeholder understands is also a skill, and sort of meet them where they're at in that communication. And
Yeah.
I also think, at least personally, it's been really helpful to understand what does my leadership care about? Like, what are their goals? How can, I don't know, maybe this is bad advice, but like, how can I make them look good? What are the
It's
things
great
that,
advice. It's
you know?
that's your goal, right? You have to help your leader, and you have to move the business. And it's been a while since those conversations have been happening, but there is a lot of literature and work about the ROI that UX brings and impacting business outcomes. But all of us have to think that way. What is your impact? What is your impact on the business? What is your impact on how the team works? What is your impact on what your manager can claim as a success for the team? And you have to adapt and evolve. That's the number one skill as a leader. Even more importantly than a nice individual contributor, I would say it's a constant flexibility and evolution.
Yeah, interesting. All right, it looks like we have time for maybe another question or two. I will pull this one up. So Olga, obviously you're at Alteryx. Can you share what challenges you're experiencing in an AI focused company?
Yes, I think it's the pace of change. I mean, change is everywhere, like we're discussing, but AI is changing much faster than any other technology that I've witnessed. And the other thing is, specifically for research and product development, we none of us have the answers. It's a new paradigm, so we need to kind of build the ship as we are in it, and it's a lot of experimentation. I would say people who work on the teams with AI have to have extraordinarily amount of agility and flexibility, and ability to fail quickly and not be broken down by that failure. Just kind of learn and keep going. So lots and lots of resilience.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that resilience, especially if you maybe come from an industry where that wasn't necessarily required, can be like a skill in itself to continuously learn.
Yes, it's like working for a startup in a big company. It really is.
Interesting. Well, thank you for sharing your answer to that question. I have one more wrap up question for you before we end today. And that is, what is one mindset shift that you want every aspiring UX leader to take away from this conversation?
Um, I think it's the fact that leadership is not about arriving, it's about evolving. And you have to continuously work at it, intentionally design it, moment at a time. Like everything else, there's a lot of styles to leaders. There's not one way. Fabric of leadership is as complex as fabric of humanity. So give yourself grace, find your own style, and be ready to be on your feet, kind of adjusting all the time.
Thank you so much for that. I think, yeah, that resilience and flexibility and vulnerability, transparency, everything we chatted about today was super, super helpful and relevant for sort of the industry that we're in with AI, but also just the nature of the work environment right now. So thank you so much, Olga, for sharing your insight. If anyone still has questions, yeah, feel free to reach out to us after the chat. I know there were some questions that we didn't get to. But otherwise, enjoy the rest of your days, everyone, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you for the opportunity. This was lovely.
Good. All right. We'll chat soon.
Take care.